Chapter 7, Sprint Planning. The sprint planning meeting is a time-box meeting in which the product owner explains the features he or she would like built in the sprint, and the team decide what they can build, how to build it, and what they can commit to. This chapter will give insight into the preparation, planning, and execution of a sprint planning meeting. Impediments to planning. As described in other chapters, the Scrum Master may need to organize meetings to coordinate the stakeholder and product owner if this is not happening as necessary. This is not a must for the Scrum Master and only happens if lack of requirements is an impediment for the Scrum team. Prior to planning them, the product owner's decision should be translated into user stories with acceptance criteria and prioritized into the backlog. At this point, the backlog may be complete, but in order for any of its stories to be ready for a sprint planning session, we need to ask the question, does the team have everything it needs to complete this story? There are often identifiable dependencies such as a third-party feed, specification documents, or points of contact that need to be supplied in order for a team to do its job. The best way to know if a story is ready for planning is to be aware of what the team's roles are and do everything possible to keep them focused on their role. That is, a software developer should be spending as much time as possible developing software as opposed to contacting third parties for specifications. A tester should be checking for quality instead of waiting for third-party software to come in. These are examples of impediments for the Scrum Master. A product owner will need to do as much research as possible to prevent these situations arising from the Scrum Master. Sprint preparation. There are often situations where the background discussion is necessary to keep the Scrum time boxes running smoothly. For example, the Scrum Master and the product owner should work hard to make sure that the sprint planning meeting is not the place to find out that a user story is not ready for the team or that acceptance criteria is too vague. Do not get me wrong, sometimes this is unavoidable since nobody thinks like a team of experts. However, confusion should be avoided wherever possible. For these reasons, I recommend that where necessary, a preparation meeting take place in which the Scrum Master, organizer, and facilitator, product owner, and tester gather to review the proposed sprint backlog. The product owner presents the backlog. The Scrum Master usually has enough technical knowledge to know if stories are ready for the team. The tester knows if the acceptance criteria will meet entry-level requirements. I usually time box this meeting strictly to 1 hour and have found that the 1 hour saves the team far more than an hour of delay or confusion in a planning meeting. The team will likely thank you for it and may even hug you, especially if they've experienced uncertainty in planning before. Sprint planning meeting. Once the product backlog is detailed enough and we are sure that it is ready to present to the team, we are ready to begin the planning process. There are 2 halves to a sprint planning meeting. In the first half, the team decide what they aim to do, and in the second half, they decide how they aim to do it. The meeting must end with a commitment from the team to deliver the sprint on time. Artifacts needed for planning. The minimum artifacts needed for the planning meeting are the sprint backlog items, usually user stories, and the tools of estimation, usually Agile planner poker cards. This is not prescribed in Scrum but is recommended as it is an Agile industry standard. It also often helps to have links to or printouts of any supporting design ideas or documents and extra blank story cards. Sprint goal. The Scrum Guide states that the sprint goal is crafted from the items in the sprint backlog once they have been selected. It gives the team wiggle room if they run into any unforeseen problems completing the work while still meeting the overall vision of the product owner. I have mentioned this upfront because in my experience it also helps focus the team to have the product owner describe upfront what he would like to achieve by the end of the sprint. This does not force the team to commit to it, but it does help them to move in the right direction. For example, the product owner may state, "This sprint, I would ideally like us to have a Formula One game that displays some live match stats as well as a circuit map. This does not specify exactly how many live stats will be available or to what level of detail the circuit map will be developed. It may even be too much for the team, but it gives a clear direction that most teams appreciate. First half of the meeting. The what? One by one, the product owner talks through the items in the proposed sprint backlog. She reads the acceptance criteria, explains any detail, and the team asks questions. The aim of the game is for the team to get enough information about the proposed sprint backlog that they can work out what they can commit to. Therefore, the team asks questions of the product owner in order to feel confident of the requirements and purpose of each product feature. I strongly suggest reading the stories in priority order to maximize time and value. Once the team have understood enough about the backlog items, they will choose a number of items that they aim to complete in the sprint. From my experience in some teams, the second half of the meeting usually gives them more detail on which they feel more comfortable to make a commitment. The Scrum Guide agrees that the team may have to renegotiate what they can commit to in the second half of the meeting. Estimating user stories. As discussed, user stories are the most common artifact used to represent the features that the product owner would like delivered. If there are any stories in the backlog that have not been estimated before, the team will usually do this during the first half of the planning meeting to help guide on the amount of effort needed to deliver the sprint. Typically, the unit of estimate for stories is story points. One by one, the team estimate user stories. They agree the estimate which is written on the story card. The method used for estimating is usually planning poker. This is beyond the scope of this class, but in short, number one, the product owner reads the story card. The team discussed what work is necessary at a high level. Third, on the count of three, all team members vote using planning poker cards, Fibonacci numbers. Number four, the two team members with the greatest difference in estimates talk it out and explain why they think the work is more or less than their colleague. Number five, the team return to point three until there's a consensus. Usually a couple of turns is enough. Number six, the agreed estimate is written on the story card. Number seven, the product owner picks the story card and returns to step one until all story cards have estimates on them. Second half of meeting, the how. Once a subset of items have been chosen by the team and all have story point estimates, they can proceed to plan out how they deliver the sprint. Typically, this is done by creating a task breakdown. The team break each story down into subtasks of the day or less in work. This makes it easy to see daily progress and have small targets. The team would typically estimate each subtask in a number of hours. Estimates on these subtasks are helpful because when they start work, they can very quickly see how much time it will take them and can readjust their plans accordingly. They can then make decisions that help them to meet daily targets. From my experience, it's very important for the product owner, scrum master, and team to be together in this half of meeting as well as the first half so the team can have questions answered quickly. In addition, the product owner will need to make trade-offs whenever the team reach their limit of work. For example, at times this limit may be half the effort of a user story. The product owner can decide whether to split stories or simply pick another smaller one. This can often be a key product decision, especially in the later sprints. Once the task breakdown is complete, the team finalizes their commitment to deliver the sprint. Considering velocity. Once a team have set a pace at which they work, velocity, they can equate story points to a period of time. For example, they may work an average of 42 points per week. This also tells them that they can take on 2 21-point stories or 2 13-point stories and 2 8-point stories in a sprint. If there are 5 sprints in a release, it tells them that they could take on about 210 story points by the end of the final sprint. The velocity should be reviewed after every sprint. The outcome of sprint planning. After sprint planning, the team should leave with certainty on what they are building, how they plan to build it, and commitment on delivering it by the end of a sprint. The product owner should be satisfied that a sprint goal has been agreed. The team will usually have a discussion between themselves about whether they can commit to delivering the feature set proposed by the product owner, and the outcome of the sprint planning meeting should be a team commitment to deliver a number of stories from the product backlog. The combination of stories and subtasks, all estimated, is known as the sprint backlog, and these form the work that the team will do in the sprint.